And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. Once again, we're going to be talking about that Arctic blast of cold air, which seems to be over the country for the last 2 weeks. And as you can see, many locations throughout the central plains, all the way down into Texas, are still 35 to 45 degrees below average. There is some good news though. As we continue to move throughout this week, it looks like that cold Arctic air is finally going to be easing up and weakening a bit. It's still going to be cold throughout the next few days, but you can see by this weekend, we're at least more near the average temperature range. Now, what that cold blast of Arctic air is allowing to happen is what's being called a major snowstorm and ice storm to develop along Texas into Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and then move up through the southeast into the Tennessee and Ohio valleys, and then finally up into the northeast. So that's one of the main things that we're going to be talking about today. Our top story is that storm, as you can see it developing there right off of Texas. Think of all that cold Arctic air down there that's allowing that ice and snow to form that you see right there. And then we're going to track it as it moves all the way up the east coast and into New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, later this week into this weekend. So, big things we're going to be talking about are where is the snow going to fall, who's going to be getting it, when are we going to be getting some ice as well, and when is that cold air finally going to be gone. So, lots to talk about. As always, if you're only interested in one of the regions or one of the stories I'm talking about, you can just go down to the comments below where I put the timestamps and you'll be able to click right to the place that you're interested in. And then also, as we saw last week especially, the forecast models change rapidly. What's true one day might not be true the next, so it's always important to actually check and make sure this is my most recent forecast video, as weather changes fast, as we all know. So I think a good place to start, what I always like to do when I'm checking out the weather forecast, is first just look at where the hazards are, where are the warnings, and it paints a pretty good picture of what's going on in the world of weather. As you can see, most of the action happening down here into the south and into the central parts of the country, where we have those wind chill warnings because of that cold Arctic air. Many of those locations 35 to 45 degrees below average, which means with that wind chill, it might actually feel like it's 50 degrees below zero. That's what's significant. When you see 20 to 30 degree below zero temperatures, that's cold enough. But then when you mix wind with it, that's where it can start to feel like it's 50 below, and that's where things can start to get dangerous, as you could get frostbite in about 10 minutes with that kind of cold. And then you can see the winter storm warnings. Crazy to see winter storm warning all the way down here in southern Texas, but you can see that's what's dominating this region. We've got that cold air, winter storm warning, so that's the key spot that we're going to be looking at throughout the day today. If we look at the winter storm severity index, this gives you a good idea of how big the storm is actually going to be. It's easy just to call every storm a major snowstorm, but I always like looking at this map because it uses the exact same metrics for every storm that we're seeing to identify how big it's actually going to be. And you can see that this on this map is being considered a major impact storm, especially for Arkansas right there, and then where we have the moderate impacts are stretching all the way from Texas down up into Pennsylvania, and then also the northeast later in the week. And one key thing to keep in mind is this is major impacts for ice and snow all the way down here in Texas and Arkansas, so it's also an extremely rare event. It's not too often that we're talking about below zero temperatures in Texas with a snowstorm and ice. And I mean, if that is usual and you live down there and this is just common, let me know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure this is a rather rare event, as that cold Arctic air that we've been seeing over the last 2 weeks is rather out of the ordinary. And then you can see in the west as well, that's actually the trailing effects of this system that's going to be affecting the south and southeast throughout the next couple of days. That's the trailing effects there. But then we also have another storm on the way that we're going to be taking a look at. So that's probably a good place to just transition here. let's take a look at the overall pattern that's shaping the weather throughout this week. That right there is this big trough dipping down into Texas. That's what's causing that big storm that we're going to be looking at from Texas, all stretching all the way up to the northeast, eventually later in the week. You can see right there, that's where we're going to be getting that ice and snow all the way from Louisiana up into Pennsylvania and New York. And then the new system that's pushing into the west, that's going to happen, looks like around Thursday night, early Friday morning. You can see this next little trough starting to build in, and then that's going to drop what looks to be some decent snowfall over the Cascades in Washington and Oregon. Now, the first thing you might notice on this map is that big low pressure that is moving through the northeast, or it was moving through the northeast early this morning. So that has already happened. That has now moved off. And if you'll remember my forecast video on Friday, that is actually the very remnants of that storm we were talking about on Friday. So you can see still affecting the country as we follow that one all the way down from Texas up into the northeast. That one is gone though, so not spending too much time on that. You might still be getting some light snow or some lake effect snow today in the northeast, but nothing, all the major impacts are behind us on that one. The one that we're focusing on is this low that you see moving down into Texas. This is where it starts bringing in some moisture, combining it with that cold air, and that's where we start getting the snow, ice, and rain throughout Texas. And then as it continues to bring in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, that's when the storm starts strengthening and just getting all that new moisture that it needs to then drop precipitation all the way through the southeast into the Tennessee, Ohio valleys, and then eventually up into the northeast by Friday and early Saturday. And then you can start to see the first effects of that new system for the west up there. That one is going to be coming through. Actually, that wasn't the first effects. First effects are right about Thursday afternoon. And then it's continued effects through Friday and into Saturday and Sunday. So we're going to be taking a look at that as well. So another thing I always like to do is just take a look at where is the precipitation going to fall. As always, I usually say ignore the northern states because that's where the snowfall is, and we're going to be looking at the snowfall in a second. But as it turns out in today's forecast, because of that cold air being pulled all the way down into Texas, we're actually going to have snowfall down here too. So maybe take this map with a grain of salt. Where you can bet that this is actually showing rainfall is down here in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, where it looks like we could be picking up 2 to 4 inches of rain as this system moves through. Just going back, you can see there was one part of this as it comes through where we are getting heavy rain throughout the entire southeast. So that's what's causing that 2 to 3 inches of rain to accumulate down there in Georgia and South Carolina. Along the coast here, that's also where we're going to be getting some rain. Looks like another 2 to 3 inches could be building in across Washington, Oregon, and the very northern part of California. Now, the map everybody's always interested in, because it's winter time and we always love to know where the snow is. This shows the total accumulated snowfall, and I'll actually back that up so we can watch this storm as it moves through. Right now, it's working its way through Utah, and then it's slowly going to start to spread out throughout the day today, working into Texas and Oklahoma, getting some major accumulations throughout tonight and into tomorrow morning. And then you're going to see it spread up right through Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and then move into the northeast. So right there, that's the strip that we're going to want to watch, because that's where that looks like we could be picking up possibly a foot in some places. I would say it's more likely to be getting 6 inches, possibly 8. But that's the strip that it seems they've been getting a lot of exciting weather over the last 2 weeks, right from Tennessee through West Virginia into Pennsylvania. It seems like that's been the bullseye of our heavy snow accumulations with that common pattern that we've had over the last 2 weeks. So again, all of that is possible. All that snowfall all the way down here into Texas and building in 6 inches possibly into Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, all that is made possible by that cold Arctic air. So as you can see, I know we've been talking about this for 2 weeks now, but it's clearly still here. The good news is it finally looks like it's going to be weakening over the next few days. It's still going to be cold, but it'll at least be weakening. And then if you are just absolutely sick of this freezing cold, you're going to be extremely excited when I show you the longer range forecast outlook. That shows some pretty promising trends when it comes to temperatures in this area that seems to have been 40 degrees below average for the last 2 weeks. And that is going to continue throughout the day today. It's another cold one, getting those extremely below average temperatures all the way down through Texas, stretching all the way up into Minnesota. And then as we get into Wednesday, you'll just notice it starts to already look like it's weakening. I mean, we're still 25 to 35 degrees below average in parts of Texas and Oklahoma, working into the Midwest in some places and at some times, but it's at least not what it looks like at the beginning of this map and what it's looked like for the last 2 weeks, where the entire central part of the country from Texas up to the US-Canada border is 40 degrees below average. And it looks like Montana is finally going to be getting out of that extreme cold in the next couple days as well. So let's continue to click through here. You can see it is still below average through Friday and Saturday, but it's not 40 to 45 degrees below average. That right there would, on a normal day, be its own story, that we're 25 degrees below average, but when compared to the last 2 weeks, that's actually going to be a welcomed uptrend in our temperatures. And then as we get into the weekend, finally getting into Saturday and Sunday, that's where it looks like we're finally going to be getting out of those extreme cold. And then as we get into the extended forecast, that's where we might actually start to build into above average temperatures for much of the country towards this time next week. Now, before we look at that overall snapshot of that forecast far out in the future, let's just look at what kind of temperatures we're still dealing with right now. So there's that high pressure, the dome that's just been sitting over us, causing all that cold air from Minnesota all the way down to Texas. You can see that cold air is still a factor. Where you see these blue colors, that's where we're below freezing. So anywhere you see blue, we're under 32 degrees. See stretching all the way down into Texas. Like I said, that's what's allowing that ice and snowstorm to happen right there. And the purple color right here is where you're below zero. So I know I said the cold air is going to be easing up, but not just yet. It looks like we're still going to be dealing with this throughout the day today for sure, and then slowly starting to ease up as we get closer to the weekend. Right here though, you can see tonight into tomorrow morning, we're still negative 13 in St. Paul, negative 15 in Iowa City, negative 2 in Green Bay. So the cold air is still here, don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to get the silver lining that the end might finally be in sight. So as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, you can see those temperatures already starting to ease up a bit. Less spots on the map showing those below zero, but majority of the country still showing that below freezing. So certainly going to be cold for the next few days. What's encouraging is what's in the extended outlook. So this is showing the average for 6 to 10 days from now. So the next few days are still going to be very cold. The next 6 to 10 days, that's the average right there. We're actually going to be above average in parts of Minnesota. I know that's going to be welcome, as that's a place that's had this wind chill warning for what seems like the last week or two. And then we're finally going to get back into above average, stretching down from Southern California through Southern Texas. Where we'll still be below average is right over Utah and the Rockies area here, and then also stretching right from Arkansas up into the Ohio Valley. So that's 6 to 10 days from now. That is a very welcomed map to see, because in the past, every time I've showed this, we've had a giant blob of 40 to 50 degree below average temperatures. This is more normally what it should look like. And then if you're living in the Midwest and the South and you're especially sick of this cold, you're going to be especially happy with what's happening 10 to 14 days from now. So that one right there was 6 to 10 day average. And then right here is actually the 10 to 14 degree average, where you can see almost the entire eastern half of the country will now be above average temperatures, whereas the Pacific Northwest will be working into the below average temperatures. So it looks like there is some winter weather moving into the Northwest over the next 2 weeks, and we'll be able to see that on this map. But first I want to look at that storm system that's going to be moving through Texas, because that's the important thing right now. So you can actually watch it. I think that's in the wrong spot. There we go. So that's the trough right there as it's digging through Texas. And what you're going to see... Oh, wait, no. All right. I know what the mistake was there. I was wondering why the map looked so different than what it should look like. And that's because I wanted to show you what's been causing all that cold air over the last 2 weeks. I forgot I made that last minute change to my queue of tabs that I have open, about 60 of them. So what has been causing that cold air? And the reason I'm showing this is because this will explain why I think it's finally going to be weakening. So this is a forecast model from a week ago. So that's why it made no sense as to what it was showing for right now. But it makes sense for explaining why that cold air has been over us for the last week. And it's been this giant, what's called the polar vortex. I usually don't like to use that term because I think it's a little bit sensationalized, but that is what that is up there. That has just been rotating over the last 2 weeks. I'll just back it up so you can see it again, just in case you missed it. That's been rotating, and that's been what's pushing all this cold air into Montana, into the Midwest, now all the way down into Texas. As that moves and rotates like that, think about the circulation. On this side of it, it's pulling that air down from the Arctic and pushing it into the middle of the country. So you can perfectly see how that works. It's technically called the polar vortex right there. That rotates and pulls that cold air down into the country. Now here's why I think it's finally going to be weakening, and we might actually start to get back to some normal temperatures. That is where the polar vortex is now. So this is now a current forecast map, not the one from a week ago. That is where it is now, and as we move through the day today, you're going to see it's still rotating right there, but it's its last little breath before it finally moves off into the Atlantic. The system that has been driving this cold weather for 2 weeks looks like it will be gone by Friday. So sorry for the confusion at the beginning of that, but that is an important thing to look at, because that's the whole justification for why this cold air might finally be leaving. It's that polar vortex right there that's been pulling the cold air down. By Wednesday, Thursday, into Friday, it moves off into the Atlantic, and then we'll finally get back to some above average temperatures. And I know that's got to be great to hear for anyone who's been dealing with those below zero temperatures for the last 2 weeks. Now, the other thing to look at on this map is, one, that system that's bringing all that snow and ice all the way from Texas into the Northeast over the next few days. That's it right there. And what this map shows, it's called vorticity. You can just think of it as storm energy. And something interesting happens here. As it digs down into Texas right here, this is when it starts pulling in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. So you're actually going to see that energy move to the right side of this system, and that's where we start to get that precipitation stretching all the way from Texas into Ohio and then moving across the country. That's where that heavy rain spreads out throughout the southeast, and then that trough finally moves up into the northeast. Now you can also see on that map that we have a system moving through the west that looks to be packing a pretty big punch right there. That looks like it has a lot of energy associated with that trough. So I think that could actually be a good place to start. We will focus on that major storm that's moving from Texas all the way into the northeast, but I think a good place to start would just be that storm in the west first, because that's actually where the snowstorm that's hitting Texas is right now. You can see that snow still falling over Washington, Oregon, Idaho, working into Utah. You can watch it actually as it creeps down But again, it originated up here in the northwest. And then it looks like the northwest will get a little bit of a break on Wednesday. And then early Thursday morning is when we start to see the traces of this new system showing up. Looks like we're going to get some more heavy rain throughout the Cascades. And then just like that storm we had this weekend, it's mostly going to be a more northern storm. The major impacts will be in Washington and Oregon, while very northern parts of California will get a taste of it, but not the bulk of the system itself. It looks like on Saturday, there could be a stronger storm moving into California, but we'll have to keep our eye on that one as that's a ways off in the forecast. So just watching the west here, that's what we're focusing on now. Looking at that little trough that's going to be building in and bringing that new system. It looks like it starts to show up on Thursday, like I said, early Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon. That's where that trough shows up, and then it builds in over the region and then moves through. That'll most likely be affecting our weather towards the end of this work week and into this weekend. So let's take a more regional look at it. You can see that's actually the storm that's going to be affecting Texas over the next few days. It's the very last remnants of that system still showing up. And then you can see that's going to ease as it moves down into Texas and brings major impacts to those regions. That's going to ease up, and it looks like we're in the clear throughout the day Wednesday. Where we start to get some precipitation again is early Thursday, not early Thursday morning, maybe around 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Thursday is when that system starts to move in. You can see that heavy snow throughout the Cascades, and then the rain along the coast where our temperatures are a bit more moderated by the warmer ocean right there. We are getting some rain and snow in California, so don't get me wrong. When I say it is a more northern storm, I just mean that's where the major impacts are going to be. Maybe over a foot or two snow accumulation in the Cascades. We'll look at that in a second. Still getting some rain and snow in California, just not as much as in Washington and Oregon. So when is that finally going to be gone? Looks like it's actually going to have a second little wind as we get into Friday night and Saturday. And then it looks like a number of little systems just continue to push over Washington and Oregon throughout what looks to be the foreseeable future in the forecast. That's been the story as of recent. So let's look at how much snow we're actually going to build up with that as it moves through. By Friday, Saturday, and then into Sunday, that's when the bulk of that system looks to be affecting us. It basically sums up what I was trying to say before. It's a more northern storm. The Cascades getting over 2 feet of snow, maybe up to 2.5 in some places throughout Washington and Oregon, even getting a bullseye in Idaho that should get 2 feet of snow. And then the very northern parts of California could get up to a foot of snow as well. So that's the snapshot of what we're going to be getting throughout this week when it comes to snowfall. Now, 2 places I want to look at. One is Oregon, because I think that's where we have all this snow accumulation, but then there might also be the threat of some ice. There was last week, so I wanted to take a close look to see if that is a threat with this storm as well. There's that first system. You're still going to be getting some rain and snow throughout the day today into tonight, early tomorrow morning. It's going to clear up on Wednesday, and then, again, 10 a.m. on Thursday is when that new system moves in. You get rain along the coast, snow in the higher elevations and farther inland, and then the good news there is as I click through that, I'm not seeing those extreme ice accumulations that we were getting with the last storm that we had where that cold air was sitting over the region. Now, with that being said, you do still see it right along the border of the snow and rain where we have some ice right there. That's right where you're on the borderline between below freezing and above freezing. So when your rain falls, it can then freeze on the surface. So you do still have to watch out for ice if you're on that boundary right there. But it's at least good to see it's not a giant area of Oregon showing ice like we saw with that storm last week. So again, let's just see what time it's coming in. Looks to be about 10 a.m. on Thursday. We get the first traces of that rain and snow. Heavy snow building in throughout the day. Thursday into Friday. Then looks like it's easing up on Saturday. And then almost a second wind as we get into Saturday night into Sunday. And then on Sunday, it looks like it's clearing up. Now, looking at California, I want to look here just to see how far south this storm is going to stretch because, like I said, it is a more northern storm. Looks like it first shows up, again, 10 a.m. on Thursday. We started to get some snow in Northern California. That spreads out into the Sierras by about 4 p.m. on Thursday, and then that rain starts to fill in down to the Bay Area as we get into Thursday night, early Friday morning. But that looks to be about as south as this storm's going to go. A bit like that storm we had this last weekend where Santa Barbara was absolutely beautiful and San Francisco was getting rain. Looks like that's going to be the case again as we get into this Thursday and Friday. And then that is the second wind of this system. 10 p.m. Friday, that's going to be a time we're going to have to look out for as that is showing some heavy rain along the coast and heavy snow in the northern parts of California. But that's kind of the last burst of that storm, and then we should be in the clear by this weekend. But again, that's a ways off in the forecast, so we're going to have to wait to see what actually happens there. So overall in the west, we've got that winter storm warning still in effect from that snow continuing to fall, and then we're going to be in the clear tomorrow, and then that new system will be building in Thursday morning that we're going to have to keep our eye on. Now, I know the thing that your eyes are probably going to on this map is what's going on down here. So I think now would be a good time to finally work our way into this region. As you can see, it actually ties in well with the west because you can actually see the warnings spreading from the west down through Utah, down through Arizona, New Mexico, into Texas. And that's all this system that we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of this live stream. So the big things I notice here, winter storm warnings in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and then also the wind chill warnings. That is still a factor, and that's actually what's allowing this snow and ice to stretch all the way as far south as it is in Texas. It's that wind chill warning still in effect where we still have some temperatures below zero throughout this region. Now again, the good news, that cold Arctic air, as we talked about earlier, looks like it should be easing up throughout the rest of this week. And then in the long range forecast, we're actually going to be getting above average. So I know this shows a lot of winter weather right now, but there's good news on the horizon that we've talked about throughout this video. But as of right now, there are some things we have to take seriously because one, that wind chill warning is still in effect. In some places, it could feel like it's 50 degrees below zero. That could give you frostbite in about 10 minutes. So that is one thing to worry about. The other thing is this snow and ice storm that this is showing where the impacts are going to be. You can see we have moderate impacts with this all the way from Texas working into Pennsylvania and parts of the Northeast, but that bullseye of major impacts in Arkansas. And one thing I think this map isn't totally taking into account, actually it is, we are showing the moderate impacts and the minor impacts here in eastern Texas and Louisiana, but right here is where we're going to be getting what looks to be some significant ice. So that's one of the key spots that we're going to be looking at. In Oklahoma City and Arkansas, that's where we're getting some of that snowfall, which they're showing could lead to some major impacts throughout that region, and then moderate impacts stretching all the way up through the Ohio Valley. So, like I said, we do have a fair bit of winter weather going on right now. Winter storm warnings, wind chill warnings, and major impacts are expected. So that's why we're spending the most time today talking about this storm. So first thing you might look at here is that storm that's moved through the Northeast. That's the one we were talking about on Friday, but that one is gone. So the one we're looking at is that low as it moves down. Let's actually back it up so you can see that snow spreading down, working its way down into Texas. Right around here is where on one side it's pulling the cold air down, on the other it's pulling moisture in. And that's where we get that snow, ice, and rain in Texas that we're going to be taking a closer look at. As it continues to pull in moisture, it continues to strengthen as it goes through Louisiana. Heavy rain throughout Mississippi, ice in the northern parts of the states where that cold air is stretching down far enough. And then you can see it spreads out. Heavy rain throughout the entire southeast. That ice still stretching in Texas and Louisiana. And then also building into West Virginia, and then finally moving off the coast and up towards the northeast. Now that is one of the key spots that we're going to have to look at with this storm and keep our eye on in future forecast videos to see what this low does as it moves up the coast. Because if it just moves off into the Atlantic, takes a straight shot, then the Northeast might not get that much snow. If it moves right along the coast, as it's showing it will right now, that's where that moisture starts pulling in from the Atlantic. The cold air is still being pulled down, and we get the snow in the Northeast. So that is set for Friday into Saturday. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that, as that's one of the things that often changes in the models is how close of a track that low is going to take to the coast, because that's going to determine what happens to the Northeast. If it moves straight off into the Atlantic, no snow. If it moves right along the coast, that's where we can build up maybe 6 inches or a foot. That's why it's fun to watch these weather models every single day, because you have to keep track of what's going on. So looking at it another way, I almost find this is the better way to watch a storm go through. There's that trough as it builds in. Right here, you're going to see it dig down, and that's where it starts bringing in the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and then you're going to see it just organize itself. Right there, you see these are called isobars. I'll try not to get too technical here, but that basically just means lines of constant pressure. And right here, you can see they're relatively spaced apart. They're not all that close. As that storm strengthens, you notice those isobars get a lot closer together. That means, one, you have heavier or more extreme winds, but then you also just have a more extreme storm in general. The closer those isobars are, the more exciting your weather is going to be typically. So that, you can see it moves through and it stretches. That's almost a perfect map to show where some of the impacts are going to be, stretching all the way from Texas through Louisiana, going through the Ohio Valley, and then finally into the Northeast. And that is what's going on for the next few days right there. And then it looks like there might be another trough following in behind it. I was hesitant to even mention that because that's a ways off in the forecast. We'll worry about that later in the week when the forecast models get a bit better. But for right now, let's actually look at what's going on. One, we got that low working its way through the Northeast. Not spending too much time on that today because by the time you're watching this video, if you're not watching it live, that storm's probably already gone. What we want to look at is the one that's building in. You're gonna see it start to show up here pretty soon, right above Texas and Louisiana. Right there, you see these isobars start to dip down, and then this is where the storm starts to strengthen. What I was just talking about, where there was one graphic here that just showed it perfectly. I would love it if I could find it right now. But right around here, this shows exactly what I was talking about. Watch these wind streams right here as they pull that cold air down. So this is now getting into Wednesday and Thursday. Large areas of Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, still below freezing, and in some places, possibly even below zero. So that's pulling the cold air down. We have the low pressure system, and wind flows into the low. So that's what's pulling the cold air down from up in Canada and the Arctic. And then on the bottom side of this, think about if the low's right here, then winds flow into it. So above it, it's pulling cold air down. Below it, it's actually pulling warm air and moisture in. So it's right along that boundary where you're going to see the heaviest precipitation. It's right where those winds collide, where you're on one side you're pulling in moisture and on the other you're pulling in cold air. That's what decides where that precipitation is going to fall. And if you're right on that boundary, that's when you have to worry about ice, because that's where rain can fall. And then during the nighttime hours, that cold air extends back down and leads to some ice right there. So that's one of the key things that we're going to be looking at when we talk about this storm. Now, just seeing it another way, think about what I was just showing about how when it starts to pull in that moisture, the storm strengthens. You can see it even better on this map because this actually shows storm energy. So right here, that's that trough building in. Doesn't really even look like much. And then as it dips down into the Gulf of Mexico, that's where it starts to bring in that energy, that moisture, and that's where you see that band of what's called vorticity, but it's easier to think of it just as storm energy, stretching all the way from Texas up into the Northeast. So I just wanted to show that because it perfectly explains what's going on. You have your isobars all far apart, nothing too exciting happening. And then as that storm deepens, brings in moisture and energy, those isobars get closer together, and you get that band of vorticity stretching from Texas up to Pennsylvania. And then, as you can see, that just spreads off and moves across the eastern country, or eastern third of the country, almost like a wave. It just goes right across, and that's where we get heavy rain throughout the southeast. But the first place we really want to focus on is who's going to be seeing this in the near future. So as we can see, the first little bits might even be starting to show up in the next hour or two in parts of Texas, as you can see that low moving through New Mexico. One spot to keep your eye on is Oklahoma here. That's where we're getting the large snow accumulations constantly in snowfall for a large period of time. The other thing to keep your eye on is where we get that red color right there. That means you're in the ice. And that is one of the big dangers with this storm, because that's what causes travel concerns and can lead to some life and property threats. Odd way of saying it right there, but you get the picture. Ice, not what you want. And you can see that's going to be a recurring theme with the storm as we get into Wednesday. So that's Wednesday morning. We'll take an even more local look at this in a second, but that's Wednesday morning into Wednesday afternoon. That's where that ice is going to be a major threat throughout Texas, Louisiana, and then that snow continues to build in to where the air is a bit colder in Oklahoma and Arkansas. So those are the key things to look out for. Where is that ice? Where is that snow? Where is the boundary? If you live somewhere where your temperatures are forecasted to be right around 32 degrees, that's where you have to keep your eye on your local resources for if they're telling you if there's going to be ice, because that's where rain can fall and then freeze, and that's where you get a strip of ice like that. So let's first take a look at the snowfall, because I think that's an easy way to look at where that boundary might be. So with this storm, majority of it looks to be falling in northern parts of Texas and Oklahoma, 3 to 6 inches there, which is significant for this part of the country. And again, that's only possible because that cold Arctic air that is still 35 to 45 degrees below average temperatures in this region, but luckily easing up. Before it does ease up though, you can see it's going to be allowing some snow to accumulate all the way down into Texas, into Arkansas, and then parts of Mississippi, and we'll be moving up into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys later. Now, so again, just snapshot, majority of the snow effects right there in Oklahoma. If we want to actually see that, first little traces come in at about 6 p.m. on Tuesday. And then throughout Tuesday night into throughout the day Wednesday into Thursday, that's where some locations have picked up 6 inches. Majority of the state, though, in that 2 to 5 inch range right there. Now, if we take a look at eastern Texas, this is one of the key spots I'm interested in right now. We see that first ice show up 12 a.m. Wednesday as the storm starts to move in, and then it spreads out throughout majority of eastern Texas. Looks like Austin is going to be in ice at 6 a.m. on Wednesday. Northern parts of the state, where we still have that cold Arctic air, is where you're going to be getting snow. That is a key spot to look out for. 12 p.m. on Wednesday, or even between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m. Wednesday. That might be when you're commuting to work tomorrow. That's where you have to watch out for that ice, as that could be building up maybe a 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch throughout much of eastern Texas, working its way into Louisiana. And then again, where you're colder, that's where you're getting the snow in more northern parts of the state. Looks like Dallas might be in that snowfall right there. If we want to take a better look at that, so let's look at the timing of when that's coming through. That looks to be about 12 a.m. Wednesday, 6 a.m. Wednesday, 12 p.m. Wednesday, and then by 6 p.m. that part of the system looks to be gone. One thing to keep your eye on is the next morning, it's going to be cold again. Precipitation keeps falling. So then the ice threat returns Thursday morning as well. But it's not the bulk of the system. So that one, certainly something to look out for, because it doesn't take that much ice to make roadways dangerous, but not as bad as that first part of the system working in Wednesday. So what I want to do on this map is go to that timing. Let's see if we can almost perfectly match it up. So it starts to push in Wednesday at about 12 a.m. So if we come here at Wednesday at about 12 a.m., that's probably the closest we're going to get. You can see where that boundary is between where you're below freezing and freezing. It's right around there where you get the ice threat, because again, that's where rain can fall, and then as it gets colder, that's where it can freeze. And then throughout the day Wednesday, you can see eastern parts of Texas remain right along that boundary, and that is why when we click through the day Wednesday, that's where we have that ice threat continuing. Even though it's 12 p.m. in the afternoon, you can see looking at this map, we're still below freezing, or right along that border at 12 p.m. So that is what's allowing that ice threat to continue right there throughout the day Wednesday. It's that cold Arctic air that you can see is being pulled down by that low pressure system causing this storm in the first place. And then that's also going to be a case as it continues to move across the southeast where that boundary is going to be. And then also the overall story of pulling that cold air down, pushing the moisture in, and strengthening the storm, providing the moisture it needs to continue to drop precipitation. One of the key areas that's going to be getting that precipitation is the southeast. And I'll go back to the beginning of the map here. In the clear throughout the day today, at least mostly, and then as that new system starts to move in, that's where Louisiana early Wednesday morning starts to get that ice. And then throughout the southern parts of the southeast, that's where we get the heavy rain, ice right along that border like we were talking about, stretching through Mississippi, snow in some of the northern parts of your states, and then heavy rain is going to be building in throughout the entire southeast as that overall system spreads across and moves off the coast. So that's it right there. You see that low still continuing to drop heavy rain getting into Thursday, Friday, and even Saturday, as you can see that strip just spread across and move across the region. So the first thing I want to look at there is Louisiana, because that looks to be the key concern right there as that ice comes in. So it looks like we're in the clear till 12 a.m. Wednesday, and then 6 a.m. Wednesday, we start to see that ice build in. And then it picks up throughout the day. Just like I was just talking about with Texas, it's that cold Arctic air that's allowing those freezing temperatures to continue. Even though it's the middle of the afternoon, we're still getting that ice throughout the northern parts of the state. So it looks like almost all Wednesday, northern parts of Louisiana are going to be in that ice. Southern parts are in that heavy rain. I'm going to have to keep my eye on if there's any flood concerns, as that's pretty significant right there, 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. But the reason I'm not spending too much time on that is the ice is the major thing I'm concerned about. And then it looks like it's showing back up 6 a.m. on Thursday, just like it did in Texas. But again, not the bulk of the system. And then your temperatures start to warm up a little bit. It's still going to be cold, but they warm up a little bit as that Arctic blast seems to be weakening right there. So I also want to look at Mississippi and Alabama. We saw that strip of ice go through there as well. Looks like it first moves in, first little traces, 12 p.m. Wednesday, 6 p.m. Wednesday, when the northern parts of the state are getting snow. Central parts are where you have to watch out for that ice, and then that heavy rain building into southern parts of the state. Going to have to keep my eye on if there's any flood warnings there. And then the same is true for Alabama. More northern parts of the state, possibly getting a little bit of snow, and then heavy rain throughout the majority of the state, because the storm is taking a path where it's almost moving straight from Louisiana up to Tennessee. So it's almost getting cut off there before dropping a majority of the ice and snow into Alabama. And then that's going to continue. Looks like you're in the clear by 12 a.m. on Friday. So just looking at the precipitation that's going to build in with that storm, you can see it's right where we weren't getting the ice and snow. Right up there, that's the ice and snow. Right there, that's where we get that heavy rain, 1 to 2 inches right there. And then as that heavy rain continues to spread out over the region, that's where we get 3 to possibly 4 inches in Georgia and South Carolina, even working into North Carolina as well. And then if we look at the snowfall, just the wide view of where it's going to go, looks like we could be getting 2 to 4 inches in Arkansas, And then parts of northern Mississippi, like I said, it's just cutting straight up into Tennessee. So just the very northern parts of Mississippi and Alabama getting maybe 1 to 3 inches of snow with this system. So like I said, it's moving straight up into Tennessee and Kentucky. So let's actually try to take a look at that on the wide view. As there it's moving, that's what we were just talking about as it brings that ice to Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. I think that's actually my major concern when it comes to this storm. Going to be significant snowfall in Oklahoma and major impacts are expected in Arkansas. That ice is the big thing I'm worried about. But then you can see, like I said, it's moving straight up into Tennessee, Kentucky, and then West Virginia and Virginia as well, as that low right there then moves off the coast and eventually up into the northeast. So let's take a look at Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Virginia, North Carolina especially, because that's where the impacts look to be the greatest with this new system moving in. Again, that right there was what moved in this morning. Not spending much time on that as that storm is already gone. Looks like for the most part on Wednesday you're in the clear, and then this new system starts to show up early Thursday morning, start to get some snow in Tennessee and Kentucky. By about 7 a.m. on Thursday, that's where the snow is building into West Virginia. Ice becomes a threat for North Carolina and Virginia, and then heavy rain building in throughout the southeast as we just looked at. Then as we get into Thursday afternoon, that's where some of that heavy snowfall starts to fall where it's colder and in your higher elevations. And then that ice continues even into the afternoon because of that cold Arctic air that's still sitting over the region, allowing it to still be freezing even though it's the afternoon. So there's that low right there. You can see it sitting right above Georgia. As that moves up and off the coast, that's going to bring the last little effects of this storm to this region, should be gone by Friday. So that's what's going to be driving your weather over the next couple of days. It's first coming in early Thursday morning, and by that I mean about 1 a.m., spreading snow where it's colder and your higher elevations, ice right along that boundary, and then rain to where it's warmer or closer to the coast. And then it's going to move off and up into the northeast. So let's take a local look at where I think is the key spot to keep our eye on with this storm. You can see clear, first snow starting to build in 1 a.m. Thursday. At 7 a.m. Thursday, that's when you might be commuting. That's where you're going to have to keep your eye on it if you're living right in this boundary between where there's the heavy rain and the heavy snow. So we got West Virginia getting snow at this point. Majority of northwestern Virginia getting snow as well. A strip of ice stretching through North Carolina and Virginia, and then heavy rain in the southern parts of the state. That looks to be the bulk of the storm right there, 7 a.m. on Thursday. As we get into 1 p.m. Thursday, you can see it's already starting to work its way north. And then that last little burst of heavy snowfall at 7 p.m. on Thursday, again, ice continuing to accumulate, maybe getting 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch all day Thursday because of those cold temperatures. That's going to stick around all the way until 7 a.m. Friday. See the last little traces, and then it's finally gone. So big time to worry about there is throughout the day Thursday. Again, I always like just looking at first comes in 1 a.m. Thursday, brings all that heavy snow, ice and rain, and then it's gone 7 p.m. Friday. So that's what's going on in that region. If we want to look at the snowfall as it builds in, that's the key strip right there. It seems like this is an area I've been talking about a lot recently, as they seem to always be in this strip of heavy snow accumulations going through Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and northern parts of Virginia. Looks like the bulk of it is in eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, where we could be getting 8 to 10 inches of snow, possibly even a foot with this one. And then you can see that strip right there. If you're along that strip, that's where you should most likely worry about if there's any. That's where you want to ask your local resources who give you the weather in your own area for if there's an ice threat where you actually live, if you're right along that boundary. So one more little look at that snowfall accumulation as it builds in right there. It looks like through Tennessee and Kentucky, that's again where we could be getting 7 inches all the way up to maybe even a foot right there. But again, the big thing that I wanted to focus on is where that boundary is, because again, that is where you're going to be getting the ice. So what I like to do is actually go to where that ice looks like it's building in. Looks like about 7 a.m. Thursday and throughout basically the entire day Thursday. So if we go to this map, we can actually look at where the boundary is between the above freezing and below freezing, because that's the key spot to look, because that's where rain can fall and then freeze on the cold pavement or exactly where you're driving basically. So as we get into 1 a.m. Thursday, that's when the storm is first building in. You can see where that boundary is. And not surprisingly, it's exactly where that ice seems to continually be showing up throughout this region. Right around there is where we see that boundary between where rain could fall, but then it might freeze because you're around 30 degrees. So that looks to be the case throughout the entire day Thursday. So it did appear weird that snow or ice was still able to accumulate into even the afternoon, but it makes sense when you look at this map. Throughout that region, you're still right along the freezing line. You're 32 degrees in Richmond, 34 in Roanoke Rapids, but then right in here, you're below freezing. That's right along that boundary where you got to keep your eye on. So one other thing we can do on this map is actually follow this low as it moves across the coast. And this is the key thing I'm going to be looking out for in every single forecast run that I look at throughout this entire week. We will be following what we're about to talk about right here. And the big story is how close to the coast this low will be, because that's going to determine what's going to happen to the northeast. If this low, after it moves through Virginia, decides just to move off into the Atlantic, like we've seen with some storms this winter, then the northeast gets no snow. If it decides to move right along the coast, like it appears to be doing, it's not right along the coast. It's off the coast, but close enough that we will be getting some snow, at least according to this forecast map. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the big thing is how close this low is to the coast. And the reason for that has to do with the circulation around the low. Think about it, it's counterclockwise, which means on your left side right here, that's where you're bringing the cold air down. On the right side, that's where you're pushing the moisture in. So when the low moves right along the coast, those two things can combine, and since moisture is being pushed in, you have a lot of water vapor available to make precipitation, and then since the cold air is also being pulled down, that's where you can accumulate large amounts of snowfall. But it all depends on if that low ends up moving right along the coast there. Might have spent way too long explaining that, but the good news is I do these forecasts every day, so I'll probably explain it better tomorrow. So let's actually look at that. Again, if you're living in the Northeast, you had that system this morning, not spending too much time on that. You might be getting a little bit more lake effect throughout the day today, but the big story we're talking about is that system that's going to be strengthening as it pulls in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and then strengthening again as it moves off into the Atlantic, where it starts pulling in moisture from the Atlantic and pulling down some cold air from Canada. Big thing we're going to be looking at is how close that low will be to the coast, because as of right now, it's showing up snow for the majority of the Northeast. In some places, it's showing even some heavy accumulations of snow, getting maybe 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. That's a ways off in the forecast though, so we are going to have to keep our eye on that, because it's not a matter of if it will change, it's a matter of how it will change. Never trust a weather forecast more than 3 days out. So as we look, there's that lake effect I was saying is still a possibility throughout the day today, as that last system continues to move out of the region, getting some last traces of snow in New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Then it looks like you're in the clear as a high moves in, and then the low, that storm system we've been talking about all video, starts to push in Thursday afternoon. By Thursday evening, looks like all of Pennsylvania is getting snow, and then heavy snow starts to build into New York by Thursday night into early Friday morning. And then as we get into Friday morning, when you might be commuting, that's where you can see the low off the coast right there. Again, that's where it's pushing the moisture in, pulling the cold air down, allowing that snowfall to fall over what appears to be basically the entire Northeast. Majority of New York, almost all of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, large areas of Pennsylvania, all getting the snow as that low moves through. Now, probably makes sense as the low moves up the coast, that snowfall spreads up farther north, then we get the heavier accumulations working into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And then it looks to be gone as we get into this weekend. So just looking at that first little system, you got some great snowfall early this morning. Probably woke up to 6 to 8 inches if you're living along the northern parts of the Northeast, right along the border right there. And then that's that new system pushing in. So if this forecast holds, and again, it's not a guarantee that the low will move up the coast like it's showing right now, but if the forecast holds, it looks like large areas of the Northeast will be getting 5 to 8 inches of snow with this one, with some of our more populated areas below 6 inches. But again, that's going to be a major snowstorm if that forecast holds. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that system as you see that strip of possibly up to even a foot of snow in some places with that storm. Now that's what was showing this morning. There is a reason I spent so much time talking about this storm on Friday. It looks to be that it ended up being a major storm for the Northeast. And then you're in the clear. When does that new one move in? Looks to be about 7 p.m. Thursday. And then by 1 a.m. on Friday, that's where the snow is built in over all of Pennsylvania, starting to get some heavier snowfall into New York, and then lighter snowfall throughout the day Friday as that system just moves up and spreads that heavier snow up into Maine. The bulk of it, let's just see, right there, that looks to be the biggest, 1 a.m. Friday. So you might be waking up early Friday morning to some great snowfall accumulations. Let's just click through again, that's what you got this morning. And then a local look at that new system coming in. New York City showing right now 4.5 inches of snow with that. So again, that's by Sunday. I typically don't trust a weather forecast more than 3 days out. So right now, this is just kind of a preliminary look at what the model's showing right now. Guaranteed this will change, so we'll have to stay updated as that forecast progresses. So I know we talked about a lot, so let's just try to take a broad view of everything that we talked about. The big story today was that low pressure system that's moving down from the west. We do have another system moving into the west in the next couple of days, but the big story is that low as it moves down into Texas, brings in that moisture and energy from the Gulf of Mexico, combined with that Arctic cold air that's been over the region, bringing snow, ice, and heavy rain to parts of Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, basically the entire South, getting some pretty heavy effects with this one. And I'll show the winter storm severity map in a second where major impacts are expected. Big thing I'm concerned about is that ice. So if your temperatures are right along 32 degrees, that's a good indication of where you might want to watch out because that's where rain can fall and then freeze. And then as we follow that system, the heavy rain spreads out throughout the southeast. Ice continues for Texas and Louisiana as the snow starts to build into West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, where we saw some places could be picking up 6 to 8 inches and maybe even a foot in some places. Then, if it decides to move up the coast, that's the big story we're going to be talking about throughout this week. If it moves up the coast, that's where the Northeast could be getting 5 to 6 inches in places like New York City, or up to a foot throughout some of your higher elevation, colder places. That's the big question mark in the forecast. How close to the coast will that move? So we will be keeping our eye on that, as well as all the impacts going on throughout the southeast as that storm develops. Now, what's really allowing that to happen is that giant blob of cold Arctic air that's been over us for what seems to be 2 weeks now, 35 to 45 degrees below average. With the wind chill, it feels like it's 50 below zero, but there's good news in the forecast. So we'll go bad news first. The bad news is it's still here right now, and that's actually what's allowing that snow and ice storm to form as far south as Texas and Louisiana. That's the bad news. It's still here right now. The good news, as I showed in that polar vortex map earlier, it appears to be moving out finally over the next few days. And then we're still going to be cold over the next few days, but then in the extended forecast as we get into this weekend and then this time next week, we're finally going to be getting above average temperatures again around this time next week. And in the extended forecast, remember I showed the map that had that average of what's going to go on 10 to 14 days from now? That's basically what the entire eastern half of the country looked like. It was above average temperatures. So the cold air, well, we're still dealing with it right now, and that's what's creating this major snow and ice storm that we've been talking about. It's going out. The end is in, what is the saying? The end is in sight. That's what I'm trying to say right there. And that has been plaguing this entire region for quite some time, so I'm sure people are very excited to hear that those below zero temperatures might finally start to leave as we get into later parts of this week. So again, perfect summary of what's going on, just looking at the winter warnings map. You can see that warning stretching all the way down from Idaho into New Mexico as that system moves down, dropping snow along the way. Where it starts to get a little more serious is when it starts to bring in that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, combined with that cold air we were just talking about. Winter storm warnings in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and then freeze warnings and wind chill warnings as well. So that's the reason we spent so much time on that storm today. What we're going to have to keep our eye on in the future is as it moves up into Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, to see if some of those winter storm warnings start to get extended into those regions. And then as well, of if it ends up moving along the coast and affecting the Northeast. One last look at the impacts that are expected, because this might be the most important thing to show in this video, along with the warnings, is where the impacts are expected with this storm. So you can see the moderate impacts in orange there, stretching from Texas all the way up into Pennsylvania, and then the major impacts expected there in Arkansas. Some of the areas I'm the most concerned about are right along eastern Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, where that ice looked to be the most significant in the next couple days. And then we'll have to keep our eye on Virginia, as they had a similar story later in the week. So hopefully this video was helpful. I know I'm always not at the top of my game after a long weekend, so guaranteed tomorrow's forecast will be a bit better and more cohesive, clear, and concise. But again, if you're living in any of these regions, be sure to check your local resources, as they'll be able to tell you the exact measures that you should take with this what is a major snow and ice storm that's building in over the next couple of days throughout this region. So thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a good day today.